Built as a logistics stopgap in World War II for ferrying troops and supplies ashore, the amphibious army DUKW had an intended lifespan of only a few months. A few months was all the Allies needed in that time of crisis. Yet here we are, still discussing the decommissioned ducks turned passenger tour vessels some 80 years later. In my Branson Stretch Duck 7 video, linked in description and pinned comment, we went in depth into how so many of these controversial craft found their way into civilian hands. Modified, retrofitted, neglected, mismanaged, the Army Duck went from World War II engineering triumph to infamous, often uninsurable safety risk worldwide. Ride the Duck Seattle, doing business as Seattle Duck Tours, would start operating in 1997, purchasing their amphibians through Ride the Ducks International's program. By 2015, the franchise had several locations throughout the U.S., even one in Guam, with Branson being the de facto headquarters and the location where the vessel conversions took place. Seattle's ducks would include a variety of stretched versions, all utilizing those long obsolete World War II chassis as their foundation. In my previous duck videos, you might remember the classifications given to the various versions of these heavily modified craft behind the scenes. A quick recap: the Fleet, aka Original Duck, closest to the original but still heavily modified. This type retains roughly the same length as the Army Duck, but still received the solid canopies, modern seating arrangement, and more modern mechanicals like the rest. The Stretch Duck, lengthened compared to the Fleet Duck for more seating capacity. The Master Jig Duck, lengthened, reinforced, widened, and with raised gunnels. This type survived the storm in Branson right alongside Duck 7, a stretch duck. And the Truck Duck. These ducks are meant to only replicate the original ducks, but are actually made from the chassis of the more modern M35 second generation Deuce and a Half Army truck, instead being purpose-built from the start to have more buoyancy, carry passengers, and provide more stability in the water. For the converted original ducks, Ride the Ducks International performed these modifications themselves in a process that, surprisingly, despite all the incidents over the years, remained overly clandestine, in my opinion at least. I think this speaks not only to Ride the Ducks as a company though, but to an overall larger issue of theme park and tourism ride safety. Regardless, if you've followed the Duck saga on Brick and Mortar this far, you might be familiar with just how much impact the modifications and maintenance issues had on these Ride the Ducks vessels as watercraft. However, these ancient machines had to receive numerous alterations to make them functional on the road just the same. Ride the Ducks Seattle by 2015 had a fleet of 20 ducks total, 10 of which being stretch ducks, modified by Ride the Ducks International in Branson. Once the Army Ducks were decommissioned throughout the late 40s and into the 50s, the state they were in was already quite deteriorated. The type of restoration that would return them to their original factory or replica military state was extremely impractical and costly. Along with interiors not originally built for hauling passengers and seats, they were simply not made for tourism, and many didn't survive military use due to their own manufacturing defects and hasty under-engineering. It's not an indictment of their engineers or manufacturers, it's just what was required in such great numbers during the war of a relatively new engineering concept to be conjured up in such a short time frame. So not only were they severely underpowered for the purpose of hauling 30-plus passengers, but the new, more modern engines they'd receive also meant entirely new drivetrains, steering, braking systems, electrical, and so on. With the gross weight when loaded of nearly 27,000 pounds, the original drum brakes with only a single fluid reservoir were switched out for disc brakes on all 3 axles, still lacking anti-lock braking though. Steering rack, arms, knuckles, and so on, many if not all mechanical wiring and hydraulic systems had to be replaced on these machines. Their original systems, even if they were still present, after so many units sat abandoned and being some 60-plus years old by the turn of the century, the inner workings would have experienced so much degradation, it's reasonable to assume they'd have barely been recognizable by modern times, let alone operational. By 2015, Ride the Duck Seattle had 2 locations the vessels would board: Seattle Center, their primary location, and Westlake Center, secondary or possible overflow. The tour route remained roughly the same regardless of the starting point. Featuring a lengthy on-road tour, guests would be driven along the Elliott Bay waterfront, pass by the Space Needle more than once, and take 2 different routes to drive along the shores of Lake Union. The Ducks would both splash in and exit the water tour via the Sunnyside Ave North boat ramp on one of the northern shores of Lake Union. Every tour utilized the Aurora Bridge primarily to reach their dedicated boat ramp. At about 10:35 a.m., Thursday, September 24, 2015, Stretch Duck 6 had just finished boarding for its first trip of the day. On board was the 54-year-old captain, the sole crew member who performed combined duties of driver, tour guide, and operator during water transit, along with 36 passengers of various ages ranging from 19 to 77, some of which foreign nationals. After the captain gave the pre-trip safety briefing, Duck 6 got underway driving along the waterfront through Pioneer Square and the downtown shopping district. Just prior, starting at 9:45 a.m., students, many of which foreign nationals, and their chaperones from North Seattle Community College began boarding 2 Bellair Charter MotorCoach Industries, or MCI, brand tour buses. The students would be taken on a tour from campus to various points of interest throughout Seattle. On board the lead bus, a 45-foot-long 2009 MCI J4500 with seating capacity for 56 passengers were the 68-year-old driver and 49 passengers. Only the driver's seat was equipped with a seatbelt. With seating raised above the luggage compartments, passengers are seated on over-the-road buses like these at an average 6 to 7 feet above the road surface, the driver's position slightly lower. The bus was equipped with anti-lock disc brakes at all 6 main hubs and had a gross vehicle weight of 54,000 pounds. At a length of 32 feet and also not equipped with passenger seatbelts, Stretch Duck 6 was traveling with its transparent vinyl curtains rolled all the way up since the weather was clear, which leaves long, nearly unobstructed openings down its port and starboard sides. In addition, the Duck's on-road bow height of roughly 71 inches, or 5'11", was around 2 inches taller than the average American male, or 3 feet higher than the bumper height of a standard passenger vehicle. Since the bow's leading edge was both pointed and not equipped with lowered bumper plates or push bars, traveling amongst normal city traffic makes the Ducks a prime example of what's referred to as vehicle mismatch or structural incompatibility, something we will cover later. The Aurora Bridge. With a posted speed limit of 40 miles per hour and 6 lanes of two-way traffic, the George Washington Memorial Bridge over Lake Union is part of Aurora Avenue, providing its local namesake, the Aurora Bridge. Despite the speed limit of 40 miles per hour, it's known locally for its more highway-like characteristics, with lanes an average 9.5 feet wide, no emergency shoulder, and lack of dividing center median or barriers. It's also considered by some to be intimidatingly narrow, the outermost lanes butting directly up against sidewalk barriers. Connecting the neighborhoods of Fremont and Queen Anne, the Aurora Bridge is also a popular thoroughfare running to and from downtown Seattle, the Woodland Park Zoo, a useful route to reach many of the city's most iconic sites. Aurora Avenue North is also a segment of Washington's historical State Route 99, eventually superseded by Interstate 5 to the east. Stretch Duck 6 was making its way north along Aurora Avenue as both Bellair Motorcoaches were traveling south. The lead bus had just passed roughly the halfway point of the Aurora Bridge, crossing at 43 miles per hour, when Duck 6 drove over the south end's first expansion joint, or the threshold where the bridge deck starts and road ends, traveling at an estimated 40+ miles per hour. At 11:11 a.m., just after passing the bridge's second expansion joint, Duck 6's driver heard an unusual clunk-clunk noise from the left front axle area. At first, the amphibian began an uncommanded slight swerve to the right. Then it suddenly and violently pulled sharply to the left. The driver, unable to move the wheel, stating it felt, quote, locked, and stating he also stood on the brakes to no effect. The lead bus was traveling in the center southbound lane when the driver first noticed Duck 6 crossing the double yellow line. The bus driver did realize instantly that the duck was heading straight for them and immediately steered to the right while applying the brakes, but with less than half a second between the duck crossing center and the impact. The unfortunate timing of their intersection made it unavoidable. The initial impact was the duck's bow breaching the driver's side of the motorcoach sidewall. Colliding at this slight offset of 21 degrees was thanks to the bus driver's quick reaction, at the very least, preventing a more head-on collision. However, the ensuing crash was still horrific, as the duck's bow would push its way further into the passenger compartment, intruding into the cabin, ripping open a 19-foot-long gash in an instant. All while the duck's remaining momentum sent it into a spin, pivoting around the bow, deforming the bus's overall shape and pushing it into the sidewalk barrier. A Ram pickup, also heading southbound, in the leftmost lane, was unable to stop in time and slammed into the duck's passenger side early in its rotation, and remained in contact with it, sliding along until it was forced into the northbound lanes just before the duck's momentum came to a halt. The Ram pickup collided near head-on into a northbound Toyota Highlander. The duck's bow had been wedged so deep into the bus's passenger compartment that during the rotation, the front end was being held up off the ground. Once Duck 6's momentum stopped, it finally separated from the motorcoach when, according to the NTSB, it swayed onto its left wheels as it separated from the motorcoach and rolled onto the Toyota Highlander briefly before coming to rest in an upright position. The NTSB reports a fifth vehicle, a Toyota Tundra pickup, was also involved, clipped by the Ram truck as it was thrown into the northbound lanes. The scene immediately following was gruesome. The crash had taken place at 11:11 a.m., and so many calls had come in that Seattle 911 dispatch declared the crash a multiple casualty incident by 11:13, just 2 minutes later. Seattle Fire Department's incident commander was on scene by 11:15 a.m., and the fire department established a medical control center at the same time, beginning triage and preparing patients for transfer to local hospitals. Additional fire department units were on scene by 11:18 a.m., and the Seattle Police Department started arriving by 11:21. A unified command structure would quickly be established, and Seattle Fire took the lead for initial rescue operations. From the NTSB, some Duck 6 passengers were able to exit the vehicle on their own, using the rear exit staircase after the driver had lowered it. Many of the motorcoach passengers who were able to exit that vehicle without assistance exited through the partially open front loading door, or, because the aisle was blocked by debris, through the right side emergency windows. On board Duck 6, no occupants were fatally injured. However, 11 passengers were completely ejected during the carnage, 4 thrown out the passenger side openings, 5 out the driver's side openings, and 2 thrown from the rear. With the NTSB also stating, a few passengers reported they were standing up when Duck 6 struck the motorcoach. From the SUV and 2 pickups caught in the mayhem, all 4 occupants reported no physical injuries. On board the motorcoach, though, the initial damage began at the bus's front lower left corner at roughly the height of the duck's bow, but inertia sent the duck essentially ramping further up into the passenger compartment, where the bow reached such a height that, quote, the interior roof was deformed from contact by the bow. This, combined with a maximum intrusion of 2 feet into the compartment, affecting nearly all seats on the driver's side, from the front all the way to at least row 10, with the seats in rows 4 through 7 completely removed and displaced. From the motorcoach, 2 passengers were fully ejected, and another 2 were partially ejected. In total, 71 occupants between the Duck and motorcoach were physically injured, all 37 aboard the Duck, including the driver, with 17 of those seriously injured. 21 of those aboard the motorcoach, including the driver sustaining minor injury, 13 seriously injured, and 5 aboard the motorcoach, seated on the driver's side in rows 4 through 10, were lost. From the City of Seattle's Office of Emergency Management After Action Report. This event posed some unique circumstances that added to the level of complexity, because the vast majority of individuals on the charter bus and a few on the Duck vehicle were foreign nationals. The State Department and various consulates became involved in the process. North Seattle College was also a critical link in identifying and providing information regarding the students involved and making contact with families and friends. In total, the victims came from 14 different countries. English fluency and social support systems varied widely from person to person. The NTSB was deployed because the two vehicles involved were commercial transportation vehicles. The Safety Board has a legislative mandate to investigate accidents that have a significant impact on the public's confidence in highway transportation safety, generate high public interest and media attention, or highlight national safety issues. The NTSB arrived on Friday with a 17-person team, taking lead in the investigation. The 4 vehicles were moved to a secure location, becoming evidence in possession of the Safety Board during the investigative process. It's unclear what became of that Toyota Tundra, but the photographs do show it was not on scene in the immediate aftermath. And according to the NTSB chairman's factual report, the Dodge's second impact was with the Toyota Tundra pickup and resulted in only scuffing to the front left bumper corner and headlight. And I'd contend that this implies the Tundra sustained the least damage of all 5 vehicles, and it's possible the airbags did not deploy. After recovering the dashcam footage from the MotorCoach, poring over photos, measurements, and observations of the crash site, downloading data from the airbag control modules, or ACMs, of both the Ram and Highlander, gathering testimony from the DUK's operator, examining all the evidence, it became clear the left front wheel and tire had locked up and at some point completely separated from the DUK's hub. After a lengthy process, investigators determined this to be the cause of the incident. The NTSB ruled out DUK 6 or MotorCoach driver performance, highway or bridge factors, Bellair's MotorCoach operations, MotorCoach or passenger car mechanical conditions, and weather conditions. The NTSB's findings point out that the left front axle housing on DUK 6 failed due to multiple initiation fatigue cracking. A tab modification from back in 2004 was found to be of poor weld quality, and this tab likely fractured before the axle housing fractured, severing at the knuckle ball. Investigators stating that this poorly executed modification by Ride the Ducks International in Branson provided no long-term benefit in preventing future axle failures. Moreover, Ride the Ducks Seattle lacked adequate protocols to verify they were keeping up with service updates or bulletins sent from Ride the Ducks International. So when Ride the Ducks Branson sent over service bulletin SB001413 and the parts needed to go along with it in October of 2013, 2 years prior to the incident, Ride the Ducks Seattle did not perform the maintenance update as instructed. The update? A bulletin recommending a metal collar of sorts, welded to the weaker section of the front axle housing and knuckleball taper to strengthen it, specifically addressing the issue caused by their haphazard welded tabs. This bulletin instructed Ride the Ducks locations to perform the repairs as soon as practical and prior to operating in 2014. When investigators spoke to 5 mechanics at Ride the Ducks Seattle's maintenance facility, quote, they stated that none of them had any knowledge of the service bulletin before the crash, and none had seen an axle with the modification. Although Ride the Ducks Branson never had an axle housing fail so catastrophically, they had observed fractures developing in the area between 03 and 04, which prompted the half measure of a welded tab as a quick fix, but again, welded poorly and then out of sight and out of mind throughout years of operation across the US, until one of those tabs was found to have failed in August of 2013, on what was likely a vehicle operating at Branson having been discovered by Ride the Ducks International. When the NTSB examined the remaining fleet of Seattle stretch ducks, all 10 were found lacking the remedy collar weld modification from October 2013, and several with the old tab welds were found developing visible cracking. From the NTSB, when asked, quote, Ride the Ducks Seattle provided no explanation as to why this service bulletin repair had not been completed. These findings also prompted an investigation into Ride the Ducks Seattle by Washington State's Utilities and Transportation Commission, or WUTC, the primary state body overseeing the Seattle duck boat operation. They identified 1 acute and 6 critical violations, 131 non-pattern violations, and 304 record-keeping violations. From the NTSB, on May 3, 2016, the Transportation Commission modified and approved a settlement with Ride the Ducks Seattle. The carrier admitted to violating 463 motor carrier safety rules, that were identified in the investigation, and was assessed increased penalties, as the Transportation Commission stated in its report that the violations reflected an insufficient approach to public safety, which the Commission cannot tolerate. The Commission assessed a total penalty of $308,000 against Ride the Duck Seattle, and also $152,000 of that total fine was held back based on the condition that Ride the Duck Seattle commit no new violations of the laws specified in their agreement for 24 months. Ride the Ducks International wrote a scathing letter to the NTSB, disputing their findings and essentially poking holes in all their methods used to test the tab and knuckleball failure. The company wanted investigators to reword their findings, and especially their probable cause section, stating, "The stresses predicted by the NTSB's analysis were significantly above the approximate fatigue endurance limit for the axles. If the NTSB's assumptions were the case, the APVs would likely have experienced multiple axle failures since their original manufacture in the 1950s. They would have never survived the Korean War, much less millions of over-the-road miles since that time." Which, first of all, the final original DUKWs rolled off production lines in about 1945. Secondly, are they trying to imply that they'd never replaced front-end knuckleballs all this time on original ducks? This differential housing suggests it could be period correct, as the ducks no longer use the six-wheel drive system. But the knuckleballs and their weakened tapered areas had clearly been replaced and fitted to the older axle at some point in its civilian service. In addition, it's laughable to imply that this was even close to the same configuration they were in during wartime. They've been cut apart, widened, lengthened, strengthened, fully framed canopies added, heavier, higher displacement engines added, seating added, and on top of that, carrying 30-plus passengers all day, every day, when back during World War II, they were originally rated to carry an estimated 28 occupants. And that's with an average weight calculation in the 1940s of around 140 pounds each, at the most, since it was based on troop weights. Investigators found that these tabs were so poorly planned and executed, they could have even exacerbated the issue. I would add that surely the Army wasn't welding some random tabs to knuckleballs back during the war using what would only in the future meet Ride the Duck specifications. It makes no sense. In response, quote, "The NTSB denies this petition in its entirety. When compared to the NTSB's model, the petitioners, Ride the Duck's model, used loads of a similar magnitude, but the center of the wheel where the reaction load was applied was somewhat farther inboard, leading to a decrease in calculated stress levels." And regardless, all this letter does is point out where everyone else went wrong, what should simply be struck from the report, while offering no alternate perspectives or solutions. The NTSB stating, "The petitioner does not sufficiently explain why this text should be removed from the report." So yeah, this petition was summarily rejected, and the NTSB's probable cause remained unchanged. Quote, "The NTSB determines that the probable cause of the Seattle crash was the mechanical failure due to improper manufacturing by Ride the Ducks International and inadequate maintenance by Ride the Ducks of Seattle of the left front axle housing of the Stretch Amphibious Passenger Vehicle, or APV, Duck 6, which resulted in loss of vehicle control. Contributing to the severity of the motor coach occupant injuries was the APV's structural incompatibility with the motor coach, causing intrusion into the motor coach sidewall, windows, and interior passenger compartment. Contributing to the severity of the APV passenger injuries were the lack of occupant crash protections and the high impact forces. Vehicle mismatch, structural incompatibility, or crash compatibility, refers to the nature of similarly sized passenger vehicles colliding and being engineered to both withstand this matched collision with crumple zones and overall similar bumper and panel heights relative to one another. Here, when vehicles are mismatched like this lifted grocery-getting death machine versus the standard family sedan, all of this passenger protection engineering is negated. Hell, even when one of these pickups with an extreme lift smashes into a standard-sized pickup, it's negated. Similar examples would be passenger car underride involving poorly and stubbornly designed semi-trailers, or even the related Boston Duck Tours accident from April 2016, in which a scooter was driven over by Duck Penelope Prue due to lack of visibility beyond and under the bow. The scooter had 2 riders, with the operator being killed and their passenger injured. This prompted Boston Duck Tours to take preventative measures, one of which adding more material to their push bars from these comparison photos, lowering the ground clearance, becoming more analogous to the height and size of standard vehicle bumpers, and later fitted with cameras and proximity sensors. In the Duck 6 case from the NTSB, for those in the intrusion area, the bow of Duck 6 striking the side of the motor coach at close to 40 miles per hour caused catastrophic intrusion damage and severe injuries that additional motor coach sidewall protections and seatbelts most likely would not have prevented. And, given the recent Seattle and Boston APV crashes, which resulted in multiple deaths and numerous injuries, the APV industry should develop and implement risk management practices geared to the special needs of APV operations. And if you'd like to see those steps and more that Boston Duck Tours has taken in this regard, check out my Duck 34 video, link in description and pinned comment. Quote, as a result of its investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board makes the following new safety recommendations. To the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, require that Ride the Ducks International, as a manufacturer, issue a recall for the stretch amphibious passenger vehicle front axle safety defect to provide owners a remedy as required under the safety recall campaign. Adopt the U.S. Coast Guard's assumed average weight per person and amend the certification regulation to specify that the gross vehicle weight rating for an amphibious passenger vehicle shall not be less than the sum of the unloaded vehicle weight, the rated cargo load, and 185 pounds times the vehicle's number of designated seating positions. Classify all APVs as non-over-the-road buses and, under the authority of the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1966, make newly manufactured APVs subject to applicable federal motor vehicle safety standards in effect at the time of manufacture, which, presumably the main focus here is to make seatbelts mandatory and prevent ejections. To the U.S. Coast Guard, amend Navigation and Vessel Inspection Circular 1-01 to ensure that 1. APV operators tell passengers that seatbelts must not be worn while the vessel is operated in the water, and 2. Before the APV enters the water or departs the dock, the master or other crew member visually checks that each passenger has unbuckled his or her seatbelt. Distribute a safety alert on amphibious passenger vehicle operations that addresses the role of risk assessment to mitigate driver distraction, as well as the need to tell passengers to remove seatbelts before waterborne operations begin. 2. Ride the Ducks International. Develop and communicate a thoroughly verified and tested repair or alternative axle housing for the front axles of your stretch APVs, and repair or replace the axle housings on your own stretch APVs as necessary. And marked as urgent, instruct your franchisees and licensees to immediately halt operation of their stretch APVs and not resume operations until they complete the axle housing repair or replacement process. To Ride the Ducks of Seattle, add to your 250-hour and annual inspection processes a procedure to verify that all actions indicated in service bulletins have been completed on all inspected vehicles. To the Passenger Vessel Association, notify all your APV operator members of the importance of the following. 1. Learning the lessons from the Seattle and Boston crashes. 2. Completing proper maintenance and service bulletin repairs. 3. Using the pre-trip safety orientation to tell passengers of APVs equipped with passenger seatbelts to unbuckle their seatbelts before the APV begins any marine operations. 4. Conduct a visual inspection to ensure that passengers have unbuckled their seatbelts prior to water entry. 5. Reduce the risk of driver distraction by having a tour guide conduct each tour. 6. Manage risk in tour operations by addressing such factors as driver distraction, route planning, vehicle characteristics, traffic density, and vehicle speed. And 7. Conduct operations according to Navigation and Vessel Inspection Circular 1-01 guidance and U.S. Coast Guard safety alerts. Ride the Ducks Branson was sold to Ripley's back in 2017. Not the entire franchise, but with Branson being the de facto corporate headquarters, any remaining franchises would become unaffiliated with Ripley's operation. So, the writing was already on the wall. The horrific sinking of Branson's Stretch Duck 7 took place soon after, in July of 2018. Ride the Ducks Seattle never fully recovered from the Aurora Bridge incident, but held out until they finally closed for good in spring of 2020. Many speculated, of course, that COVID was the reason, due to the timing. But the crash in 2015 saw Ride the Duck Seattle liable for millions paid out to victims. Those following the suit well aware, and even the company itself finally admitting, the crash's financial impact was too much for the company to overcome. There's only been a handful of sponsors I consider partnering with for brick and mortar, and as you may know, I now have very strict criteria in that we don't allow sponsor spots in videos that memorialize the victims. So it is with great pleasure that Ground News has agreed to support brick and mortar in a way that allows us to stick to this initiative and point you to a service that I use personally and is incredibly valuable. It's a way to get your news without algorithms, without partisanship, without bias, and establish the facts to help you stay better informed. Links to Ground News will be in description and pinned comment. And thanks so much to all those who support this channel, especially those top tier Patreon supporters: Robert G, Paul R, P Rush, Nathan M, Maximum Hats, Manuel M, Kenneth P, Christian T, Broken Spectrum, Andrew S, Andrew M, and Alex S. And don't forget, your safety matters.